Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Testing Podcast. We've got our first guest in our new studio today. Alejandra, welcome to the Testing Podcast.
Thank you.
Privileged one of the very first.
Yeah, very
welcome.
first. So, but you need to know we have a tradition for guests when we start the podcast. I reckon you're going to cotton on without any major instructional lessons here. So let's see how we get on, all right?
Okay.
Here we go. Testing 1.
Testing 2.
Testing 3.
Testing 4.
Yay, we've got it. Welcome.
Well,
You're
well
officially
done.
part of our
Welcome.
testing
That's
podcast.
it. You're officially testing 4. You look petrified then, like, what's
do we
going
do?
to do?
What's going on?
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
it's lovely to have you here.
yeah, really lovely.
Such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and so Alejandra reached out to me on LinkedIn, wasn't it? You kind of, I think, seen a bit of what we're doing and sort of said, it'd be great to chat and see if there's anything we can do to collaborate. This was literally last week, and we had a Zoom, didn't we? And
Yep.
and here you are in the studio just a few days
Happened
later.
so fast.
It did,
Yes.
didn't it? Yeah, so really good. And so you're a psychotherapist, and you specialise in fertility and gynecological issues.
Yes.
But obviously you see a lot of fertility patients. So we're going to talk psychotherapy today, which kind of...
Gosh, we've not
it
done
does,
that
doesn't
before,
it?
haven't we?
Yeah.
Never done that before, have we?
No, it feels like a big subject in some ways, I think, to kind of introduce. But I'm really looking forward to this conversation, especially having worked as an acupuncturist and worked really closely with people.
Sure.
But I think this is going to be absolutely fascinating. And I think guys need to listen to this episode with an open mind and actually realise that this is a really important subject. So I think we've got to kick off with what is psychotherapy, because it sounds like quite a big word.
It sounds very scary.
It does sound
it?
very scary. So
sound
come on,
scary.
let's demystify that.
So
what is
psychotherapy is a process where a psychotherapist and a client explore and address the feelings, emotions, and thoughts that a client might have.
Okay.
That's in short what happens. A few other things that I can say about psychotherapy is that it's a confidential space. So the client goes with the security that nothing that is discussed in the session will leave the session. It's also a place where the psychotherapist should be non-judgmental. So the therapist is not going to be judging whatever the client feels or says. That's not the intent. And it should be a very supportive and caring space for the client.
Sounds lovely, really. Yeah, sounds good to me.
It's a good advert for me, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the preachers are quiet because I've gone through my own journey through fertility and used counselling, and hugely pro getting therapy and seeking support, because ultimately I think if you open up and talk about things, it makes everything just easier to deal with. And I think I've banged that drum from day one of being involved with testing, and the charity, isn't it, has been very much kind of be open and
talk,
have a conversation. Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah, but it's so glad to hear that you have had a good experience with psychotherapy, because I think that something that happens is that, especially among men, psychotherapy is not often discussed, and there is not examples of people that come to their friends, their colleagues, and say, I'm going through psychotherapy. So to be able to normalize and hear you say, I have done it, and it was helpful, it's really great to hear. And I think the more people talk about, I have done it, I'm doing it, the more people will feel that it is okay to do it.
Yeah.
but I think there's a kind of and I think there's kind of a stigma and a misconception, particularly among men, more than women, I believe, in that if you need, or if psychotherapy or counselling or similar is kind of required, there's that stigma of I must be, or I can't talk about this to anyone. But actually, like, it's fine. I believe we should go really regularly. I think we should be like, it should be a monthly thing, because
You should.
I should. You should. I should.
He does talk a lot anyway.
Yeah. You can't shut me up once I start talking. But I believe we should, because I think actually from my own experience and having that space to actually just not be judged, and everything you just mentioned, described about what you do, it felt very much that safe space for me, so that I could actually say things that perhaps at the time I wouldn't have said to anyone, and maybe not even my partner at the time, of how I felt. And the fact that I didn't feel judged, and that it was a safe space for me to kind of completely explore my emotions. Oh my God, it was amazing. I was like, I could actually just get this out, all this pent up energy that I should just block this out. And I felt like I was kind of wrong for feeling what I felt. I thought I had a real bad issue, but actually once someone broke down and told me exactly what the reason was behind that, and how to kind of overcome it and perhaps look for a more positive sort of feeling about it, it was like, oh my God, finally someone's listened to me. But actually it wasn't a case that someone was listening to me finally. It was actually I was able to finally talk it out rather than just block it up.
Yeah.
And I think having that safe space is just so important.
And it's that weight, isn't it, on your shoulders all the time, and being able to just offload that with somebody that's going to listen and not be judgmental, and then go, actually, that's quite a normal, sort of feeling to have, and there's no wonder why you're feeling the way you are and anxious the way you are, and actually that's quite a normal reaction, and there's often ways to look at that in a different way.
Yes, because the psychotherapist is trained to hold those emotions. You know, if you tell a friend, I'm experiencing, the worst, suicidal ideation, a friend will not know what to do. But a psychotherapist is trained to hold that and be with you through that conversation. And I think that's one of the reasons why psychotherapy can be very helpful, but it's not the only reason. I think there are many different ways in which psychotherapy helps. The way I explain to my clients is that when I'm working with a client, I'm thinking about 3 different layers. So the top layer is the most superficial layer, which is where we are talking about tools and techniques that will make their day-to-day more comfortable. So, for example, if you're dealing with anxiety, what are the techniques that we can use to ensure that you feel less anxious? That is not psychotherapy, though. For me, that is just kind of like a Band-Aid that we're putting on something that feels very, very difficult, but it's needed because it makes your day-to-day more comfortable. The second layer is what you talked about, is the talk therapy. It's expressing your feelings, it's expressing your thoughts, and as you very well explained, it just feels like, something that it just feels very heavy in your body, that it feels like a dark cloud over you. Once you're able to articulate, you feel that it softens, that it feels a little bit less, that articulation, that the word that we'll use is catharsis. We talk and we let that out. So that is very beneficial, but it's also beneficial because we make sense of things. So the talking helps us understand why we feel the way we feel, what you were saying, why we feel so sad, and use the language, for example, of grief. What are the different layers of the grief? And then we start understanding it makes sense to feel this way or that way, and that is a validation that we just don't feel so different, so odd. So that's the second layer, where we get the talking offers the catharsis and the understanding. And then the final layer is the relationship between the therapist, the psychotherapist, and the client, because all the research shows that relationship is actually the most important healing agent. And I'm sure you have experienced it, that when you are feeling unwell, sad, or if something hurts, if you are with somebody that cares for you or loves you, and you're just sitting with them, they're not doing anything, but something softens, something feels nicer, something feels better, and at its best, this is what you should be getting from therapy, that you're with your psychotherapist and you feel, that I'm accepted, I'm not judged, I am supported. And that is very, very healing.
Wow. And do you think men are open to this idea? In terms of your practice, how many women are you seeing and how many men are you seeing around fertility? I bet it's not 50-50 split, is it?
No, and that's very, very sad. It's not 50-50. I wouldn't be able to give you percentages, but it is not... I think men, not just about fertility, but about any other issues, depression, anxiety, they go less to psychotherapy, and it's for the issues that you mentioned. Is the culture where men are seen as they need to be strong, they need to be stoic, self-reliant, they have to solve their own emotional issues by themselves. So I think they access therapy less, and that is so worrisome, because the leading cause of death among men under 50 is suicide. It's higher than...
That's quite scary, isn't it?
It's very scary. Heart issues, more than accidents, more than cancer, more than anything, it's suicide. So, it's very scary to know that there is a resource for men that they can access, but obviously they are not, and the consequences are, beyond horrible.
Yeah. And of course, men, it's well known that they don't access medical support so well. They don't go to their GPs. They're not likely to speak up to get help. And it's just, it's really sad. And we saw it, you know, me and Toby, when we were running the support group for the charity. It's like we had some nights where we're talking suicidal thoughts, weren't we? And suicidal kind of feelings amongst some of the guys on the space. And like, you know, I've had a lot of experience of supporting patients. You not so, and kind of probably felt a bit out of your depth. I was like, okay, I was okay with holding that space, but that was a big night for us. Kind of, you know, when you got guys talking about that sort of stuff.
Yeah. But I think that is the cultural perception about how men should be, the stigma about mental health. But I also think is the doubt of whether it can help. I think for some people think, well, psychotherapy, how is it really going to help me? And they don't know that there is, you know, research of decades and decades showing that psychotherapy does help. And so that is something that, you know, I don't think they appreciate the impact that it can actually have.
But it's almost the key to unlocking that emotional pain that you go through. You know, when you've had a bad result, or you know your partner's had a bad result coming out of a clinic, and you're going like, oh my goodness, how am I going to deal with that? You've got to internalize it yourself. You're trying to support your partner, but not necessarily having the right words to try and express how you're feeling or how your partner's feeling, and that can create more anxiety between you as well. So having a safe space to be able to discuss what that pain, that emotional pain is feeling for you is really, really important, isn't it? And to try and unlock that and to normalize it and say, actually, you're feeling this right now, but, you know, let's try and work out why and where you can dissipate that pain.
Yeah, and in some relationships, it works well, where the male and the female are able to share how they feel. But sometimes the man feels that the woman is already going through the injections. They're going through this, and they're going through this, and the test, and all of that, and they feel like I cannot break down. I don't have the space. I need to be the strong one because my wife is already going through so much. So the man is carrying his own stress and anxiety, depression, and many other issues, self-esteem, and other difficulties, but also trying to support the woman. And the question is, who is supporting that man?
That's the key thing.
That literally reminds me of me and my journey, though, what you've just said. I was about to say that before you mentioned it, because when we were at the height of our fertility journey, all I had in my head was, I've got to be strong for my partner, Katie. I've just got to be there. And the minute I accept that I'm not okay, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to be strong enough to be there for her. So I was just like blocking out all my emotions, and just focused on trying to get her through the next step, or, you know, her emotions and stuff. But actually that was just a cork in a bottle that's just getting more and more pressure behind it, because the analogy I always give is you can't pour from an empty cup, and when that cup's empty,
I always say the same.
Like,
I think you got it from me.
I probably did, but like, I told
coached you.
the
same books.
but it's something I really stand by now, because I think if you're empty yourself emotionally, then how are you then supposed to offer that support that you need for your partner?
Yes.
And vice versa. It's really important for them to equally have that kind of therapy, so that they're also better equipped. Because that weight off your shoulder and that safe space where you can just kind of almost dump it somewhere else, then when you come back to your relationship, it's just a bit easier to then have conversations that you'll have a more positive perspective on it, I think.
Yeah, but it's not only for the man to actually go through that through therapy, to be able to get that support and support the partner, but it is also because in therapy we can explore how you communicate that to your partner. How do you actually and challenge that notion? Do you really have to be the strong one for her, or how do you both communicate in a way that it's beneficial for the relationship? What I have seen is sometimes a fertility journey really tests a relationship.
100%.
And sometimes it can make it really, really strong, actually. And I think psychotherapy can help with that, because it actually allows for the man, to explore how to communicate with their wives, and that creates it makes the bond really, really strong. Sometimes it actually, very sadly, it results on the breakdown of relationships, because it is they have different ways of looking at it. They are they are not communicating effectively. So it really challenges the relationship very profoundly.
It challenges yourself, doesn't it?
Oh, completely.
It's definitely one of the biggest challenges I've ever faced going through fertility issues.
I think one of the things, so going back to like the man needing to stay strong, is that the woman gets really frustrated because the guy isn't talking. He's not. She can see that he's struggling and that he's upset or he's depressed or he's withdrawn. He's not performing in the bedroom because of the anxiety and the stress, but he won't bloody talk about it. And I think this is like, what you're saying is like, okay, well, I've got to stay strong. I can't possibly show any weakness. I can't upset my partner. But she's getting infuriated because he's not talking. Whereas actually, if he opened up and was honest about what was going on, it would make it a whole lot easier and open up that communication between the two of them. It's really difficult. And do you get couples coming together, or do you sort of see people on their own as individuals? How does it kind of work in that sense?
So it's very psychotherapy and the different approaches is something that we can go into. But something that is very important to communicate is that there's psychotherapists that specialize in individuals. I work individually, one-on-one with people, and there are psychotherapists that specialize on working with couples. And they have to go through very specific training to work with couples. And as part of the organization that I have founded, we have psychotherapists that work with people individually and couples and couple psychotherapists.
Okay. What do you think the resistance is to, with men coming to therapy? Why do you think there is that resistance, that men are like, I'm not sure it's for me? Why does that happen?
I think it's the culture what we're talking about, like the feeling of I need to be strong, I need to be self-reliant, this vision of I need to be stoic. I think it's also the fact that it's not normalized, that people don't talk about it. I think it's the doubt as whether it will be beneficial. But I think ultimately something that, is sitting underneath all of that is the fear that I will go to psychotherapy and it would just open the gates to all of these very, very difficult emotions. And I will finally have to say them. And I will have to finally explore them. And I think that is very, very difficult because it's just feeling, something I think people feel like, I'm holding, and I just need to keep holding and going through this. And psychotherapy is going to actually push you to actually say, okay, are you really okay? Let's talk about that. And that is very, very scary.
Yeah. It's opening up all your vulnerabilities, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And I think, in my mind, when I've seen counsellors for fertility issues, I think the experience that I had afterwards, after the sort of fear of going and saying, well, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to get asked and so forth, is that I came out of it feeling as though I've just had my life coached a little bit, and just a realization that things are actually okay and there is an alternative way of seeing the world. And the sort of issues that have been presented to you. So in terms of the language that I would probably like to sort of express it as is life coaching. It's somebody holding your hand and saying, actually, life is okay. You may be going through some challenges, but we can help you through that. And I think that's what psychotherapy, is for me. I've read quite a few different books on cyber cybernetics and various other things. And it's about trying to understand how you either compartmentalize the world or how you make sense of the world and other people's view of different techniques of seeing different levels of data. So and emotions is such a difficult one because as a man you're opening up that control gate that you've put in and all the barriers of your emotions and your vulnerabilities, and you're having to open it up, and you don't know exactly what's going to happen as a result of it.
But I think that what people need to know is that we are trained on that.
That's it.
And that we know that you are coming to us very afraid. So you shouldn't expect us to, that you will come to us and we'll be like, okay, now tell me everything. How are you feeling? Obviously, we need to take it one step at a time. And psychotherapy for us is very, very important to go at the pace of the client. So if I see that the client is struggling to opening up, I'm not going to force the client, because if the client is not opening up, there is a reason for it. It's a defense. And we cannot go against that defense mechanism. We just have to allow it for it to slowly soften. And when the client is ready, then we will talk about it. And also we in psychotherapy, obviously we're trained to ensure that, you open up and we don't just leave you with that. And then you just go home and you're just feeling awful for 5 days. The sessions have a rhythm. So we start somewhere, then we go through a conversation that might be difficult, and then we are very aware of, okay, it's the 15 minutes, so we're coming to an end. So where are we leaving? Where are we leaving you? Are you going to be okay going home? How are you going to process this conversation? What are you going to do afterwards? So it is our job to care for you, to ensure that you are going through all of those, all of that waves, the roller coaster. Thank you. In a way that is, ethical and effective and caring and supportive.
So I think it's being vulnerable, isn't it? It's being open. And I think one of the issues of going for therapy is that it's seen as a weakness, that especially probably amongst men. It's like, oh, okay, I need support, I need help, I'm a bit weak. And I wonder if that goes back to a really primitive thing of like back in the day, when we lived in tribes, if you were the weak one, you weren't a good hunter or whatever, or you were a bit lame, you had a dodgy leg, you would be ousted from the tribe. So to show, and you see this in teenagers when they're growing up as well, it's like, how those kind of groups kind of change and form.
Yeah.
And so maybe there's a really primitive thing in there for men that's like, I can't show a weakness. But I think actually it shows real strength to go and open yourself up and say, right, okay, I want to tackle this. It's only going to make you stronger. It really is. You got 3 men here that have all been through some kind of therapy or going through therapy still. So we're all the converted.
But I think it makes you more resilient as well, doesn't it? Because what I learned from my experiences, it's just helped me to prepare for the next challenge. Every single human being on this planet at some point in their life will have some form of struggle. And some get many more than others. Some are fortunate and don't get as many. But I think actually it just prepares you to be a bit more resilient and actually helps you identify if you're feeling a bit rubbish, like how you can overcome those feelings and emotions. It's definitely equipped me with loads of those kind of things, and I live a happier lifestyle because of that now, I think.
Yes, but there is a book that I really love the title. The title is The Examined Life, and it's written by a psychotherapist. And the reason why I love that title is because, yes, psychotherapy can help with difficulties, but it also makes us stop and think about our life. Why am I feeling the way I'm feeling? Why am I relating to others the way I'm relating? Why am I relating to myself the way I'm relating? Who am I? Why am I behaving this way? And without that space, sometimes I feel that people live their lives, not being very conscious. It's just inertia. I do this and then I have to do this and then I have to do that. And they don't stop to think, what is my life? And then you're 17, you have actually thought, where do I find meaning? What gives me happiness? Is this right for me? Is it actually right for me to get married? Or maybe I should actually challenge that conception. Mm-hmm. Should I have children or should I challenge that conception? Should I, all of those questions. I feel that sometimes people just go on this path and they move and they move and they have lived a life that hasn't been thought, they haven't been conscious, and that's what conscious about it. And I think that's why I love psychotherapy, is because the title, The Examined Life, it's a life that is lived consciously, knowing who am I, how am I relating to others, where do I find meaning, where I find purpose. So it's not just for difficulties. I think it is just to really get to know ourselves and ensure that we're living a life that is that we're living life consciously.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you think social media has a sort of negative influence on that kind of trait? Do you think
it's like Western society, isn't it? It's okay. Well, you grow up, you go to uni, you get a job, you earn this much money, you should be earning this much money. You need this type of house, this type of dog. Yeah. You should have children. Yeah. You should get married. It's
this driven lifestyle.
So people aren't, like you say, living life consciously and being true to themselves. Actually, what do I want? What do I want out of my life?
But how hard it is to ask that question, because that means that we are going to have to perhaps challenge some societal norms or challenge the groups where we are. If we tell ourselves, for example, children, right? If we say, no, actually, I don't want to have children, that challenges, who we see, how we see ourselves. It challenges the groups around us that might be our parents that might be expecting us to have children, so they become grandparents. Our friends, they might feel challenged by how we're living our lives. So it's an exploration that is not easy, and it's not devoid of challenges. But I think it's worthwhile.
Yeah. And what are the kind of common themes that come up for you when you're working with men that are going through fertility stuff? What kind of comes up?
So what the research shows is that very common is depression and anxiety. So about 65% of men going through fertility show depression symptoms. 65. So that is half of men. And I think it's around 59% that show anxiety symptoms. And something that I will stress is that the men, obviously, as we're discussing, they're not very comfortable talking about emotions. And in questionnaires, they underrepresent how they're actually feeling. Yeah. So I think that 69% of depression, 65% depression, 59% anxiety is really underrepresenting the prevalence of those emotions amongst men. I don't know if in your work that's your experience.
Do you think that's because of lack of awareness or education around fertility and what is actually going on when you actually go to a fertility clinic, or do you think it's something slightly wider than that? Why men are so particularly sort of anxious or stressed?
I think that it's a very interesting question. Are people becoming more anxious and showing more symptoms of depression? I think it's a little bit hard because behind that there is a greater awareness of those topics. So if we're going to compare depression, percentages of people dealing with depression and anxiety to 50 years ago, the way those issues were diagnosed and the awareness was less, so I think it will be very difficult to compare. But in the data that I'm giving you, 65% of men dealing with depression, we're comparing it to a cohort of similar men right now. Yep. And for those men that are comparable to the other group but are not going through a fertility treatment, the percentages are much lower. Much lower. Yeah. Does that
really
answer
interesting.
The question?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, because I think one of the sort of aims and missions that we've got within sort of Testim is more about trying to raise the awareness and education in men about fertility and why fertility is such a big issue in male fertility, for example, which are often unexplored and often led certainly by the sort of medical profession as more of a female issue, and it leaves men out in the cold, not really understanding if there's anything wrong with them or if it's just going to be a matter that they've got to try and help and manage the emotions of their partner whilst it's going through a very difficult time of unexplained infertility, for example. So I'm sure it's wide and it's cumbersome, all the different types of emotions that lead to sort of depression and anxiety. But I do feel that, men in particular don't really get, the hand held through this whole journey and understand how to deal with their emotions as they go through what can be a really difficult journey.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, in terms of, for example, perceptions about infertility, there is always, I think the focus is on the female, the tests, and also the support. It's seen as a women's issue, and so I agree that because it's seen as a women's issue, then men, I think that there is less awareness of the support that they could get or the support that they should get. But I think also something to think about is that underneath those symptoms of depression and anxiety, there are many other different emotions. And some issues, you asked me what are the issues I see, self-esteem, for example, and the sense of masculinity. Among British men, there's seeing that there is a correlation between fertility and virility. And so that is, that really challenges if you feel that you are, the thought for some people is that they are failing as sexual beings. And that really challenges how people see themselves. So their self-esteem, so there is something around that. I think also behind the depression and the anxiety are the relational issues that we're talking about. Because if the men and actually there's research that shows that men that are going through fertility treatments, they feel less satisfaction in the relationships than men that are not going through fertility treatments, because it really challenges them. So the relational issues are also there, and the feeling of a stigma and isolation. And I think isolation is very important to think about, because when we're talking about men don't access psychotherapy and they don't access support groups and they don't talk to their friends about it. So there's a very, very strong sense of isolation, and they are by themselves carrying all of these emotions, all of this stress and anxiety. So the isolation and stigma are also, experiences that I see in my practice.
And I think that's what you're kind of getting at, Mike, isn't it? That throughout the treatment process and the investigation process, men are isolated.
Yeah.
They do the semen analysis, and that's pretty much it. And you had it, Toby, didn't you, with your consultations? Like your results were read out to Katie. They weren't read out to you.
I was just sat in the corner of the room like a child.
It's like, wow, how does that make a man feel? That just feeds into this. I'm isolated. I'm not important. I'm less of a man.
I'm less of a man, exactly. I'm less of a sexual being. I'm less viral. I don't know. Viral. So definitely.
Yeah. And I think it has an impact on work as well, doesn't it, for men, definitely, in terms of their kind of, that depression and anxiety then stretches into their work. It stretches into their relationships and friendships. A lot of couples end up kind of, the social network gets a lot smaller, doesn't it? Because
I think you go through an avoidance sort of defense mechanism,
totally
don't you? You know, so that you avoid other couples that are having children or have got small children, because it's so difficult to manage that emotion around other friends at times. So
absolutely, clients talk about that so much that they just feel so triggered when they get an announcement from a friend that, I'm having my third child, and they get invited to these parties or these barbecues where there are couples with children, and that is very, very difficult to face for sure. And so they avoid that, but they also avoid it because of the comments and questions that are so unhelpful. When are you going to have a child?
Exactly.
Why are people asking that question? They actually don't know what people are going through, or even if they know that you're going through a fertility treatment, you should just relax and it will happen.
At times we hear that one.
I mean, there are so many of those, or people with the best intention. Why don't you try? I don't know. I mean, they're just the most random things that I have heard. Like, eat prunes. You have to eat 5 prunes a day, and it will. It's so random. But all these people that come with all these advices, you should do that, you should do that. They work for my friend. So there's just, I think people also avoid, not just because they don't want to see others with children, which is very, very challenging, but it's also because of those unhelpful comments and questions. And I think that's something that, I'm very keen on ensuring that people are aware of, the impact that they can have on people. You don't know what people are going through. You don't know why is it that they have been married for 5 years and they don't have a child.
Or perhaps, they've made that choice that they don't want to have children. But we assume, it goes back to the societal issue, doesn't it? And
we just make the assumption, don't we,
that everyone wants to have a child. So you just go wading in with that question, and it's like, actually, you haven't really thought about this person's choice, and it's not really any of my business whatsoever.
And the judgment, because if you say, I haven't decided, I don't want to have a child, well, you can imagine all the barrage of judgment that you will get from people. Well, why not? This is what people do. They have children, but this judgment and this conception, this preconception is so ingrained in society, and this is why it's so difficult to go through this journey. And something that we haven't talked about is how it challenges people's identity, because people can see, or they imagine themselves to be a husband, a father, and when that is challenged, then it just causes such distress, because then it challenges who am I going to be if I'm not a father? What is my identity?
Yeah.
And what's my purpose? Why am I here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which I guess then maybe that feeds into the suicidal thoughts of, well, if I can't do this, what am I here for?
What's the point?
What's that point?
Yeah.
What's the difference between psychotherapy? We've heard the word counselling. We've heard the word coaching. These are all words that are banded around the table today. Because I think this is probably a big thing for patients, clients as well. It's like, okay, well, there's psychotherapy. I get offered counselling at my clinic. They have to offer me one session of counselling minimum when I'm at an IVF clinic. There's life coaches, there's fertility coaches, there's dietitians, nutritionists. How do they know what's what and what's right for them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll talk about the mental health space, and yes, definitely there, and the three that you have mentioned: psychotherapy, counseling, and coaching. So psychotherapy is longer term work and on more a little bit more complex issues. Counseling is shorter term work, and you actually get through the NHS, so you get between 6 and 10 sessions. So it's shorter term work, and because it's shorter term work, it doesn't go as deep. So what we are going to be talking in counseling are issues such as how do I deal with the stress of a fertility treatment, for example. But in psychotherapy, we're going to go a little bit deeper. The feelings of shame, of identity, anxiety, depression, and that is longer term work. And so it's the difference is I think the length of the work is the how deep we go and the training. And so we a great number of psychotherapists are accredited and registered with the UKCP, which is the UK Council for Psychotherapy. And in order to be accredited by the organization, you have to study between 4 and 6 years. Counselors and also psychotherapists registered with the BACP, the British Association for Counseling and Psychotherapy, I think. And for that, the training is between 2 and 3 years. So there's a little bit of a difference, of course, because, we're working on a little bit different issues. I think both have a place in psychotherapy or in the world, actually, because, yes, sometimes you do need help thinking about the stress that is going on in your life. And so going to a counselor might be beneficial. But sometimes, there's a little bit of more of a complexity in the issue. And you might want to go, in that case, to a psychotherapist. So yeah, I think that's the way I would see that. But I think there's space for both. The other thing is I would say is counselors, you do find them in the fertility clinics. So fertility clinics are required by the HFEA to offer one counseling session. And also on other issues, you will find counselors in schools, pastoral work. You will find them in churches, in volunteering places. And psychotherapists, you will find them more in private practice, I think.
And is psychotherapy a bit more medical in that sense, in terms of, I don't know, is it attached to kind of GP practices sometimes or within psychiatric kind of hospitals? Is that, would you see psychotherapy more in that realm rather than?
No, I will actually see, and sorry, I will introduce another one, psychologist. So psychologist is what I will see generally within the working in hospitals.
Okay.
So if I did a part of my training in a hospital, and the majority of people working there were psychologists. So psychologists can only train through the NHS, so they are often associated to the NHS.
Whereas, so psychotherapy is more of a private practice kind of thing.
Yes, but you can access them in different ways. But yeah, I think so. The other one that you mentioned is coaches. So coaches are goal oriented. So we have a goal, and they work towards that goal. Generally we talk about professional coaches. So they have you have a goal of, I want to set up an enterprise, so I want to get a promotion. So they're very goal oriented, and they help you think about how to get to the goal. Now I have to admit that I'm giving you all of these definitions, and I have my own biases because I'm a psychotherapist. So, I chose to be a psychotherapist for a reason. So perhaps a counselor or a coach will speak about things in a different way. And I also want to say that they are wonderful counselors that have been doing the work for many years, and they will get, the work will feel similar to a psychotherapist. So, I hope that clarifies things a little bit. But I think the important thing for your audience is that the word therapist, counselor gets thrown, by people without actually the accreditation. So I think no matter whether you go to a counselor, a psychotherapist, or a coach, I think one of the questions that you have to ask is, what is your accreditation? Where are you registered? Are you registered with a BACP? Are you registered with a UKCP? There is another organization specifically for counselors. So it's something to really check, because I think it is not as regulated as other professions. So I think people really need to check what is your, are you registered? Because also some people are you registered now with them?
So it's going to give assurance really of your training and the in-depth knowledge that you've got and you can impart on patients, really, isn't it? Really, it's that assurance that you're going to be looked after.
Absolutely, but there is also if you work with a psychotherapist that is registered with the UKCP, if you have any complaints, you reach out to the UKCP, and there will be a process to to address that concern regarding that psychotherapy. So you have the guarantee that it's part of
regulated.
It's regulated, exactly.
And it's also about just finding what's right for you, isn't it? I would have that with patients when I was an acupuncturist. It's like, okay, maybe I'm the right one for you, maybe I'm not. Maybe you're going to prefer so-and-so down the road because they've got a different approach or a different style. It might be that you try psychotherapy and it's not for you and you go and find a counsellor or a coach and that does suit you, or it might be the other way around. It is, I think, and I think this is one of the great things now is there are many different ways of getting support. I think the key thing is speaking up and getting that support.
I think, two things I will say about that. One is that in terms of psychotherapy, and we're talking about this before, that there are many different approaches to psychotherapy. So there are 4 fundamental approaches to psychotherapy. And just to give you an example, underneath one of them, there are 200 subtypes. So there are really hundreds and hundreds of types of psychotherapy. And I think it's very difficult for a client to go to a psychotherapist and ask, what is your approach? Is it existential, or is it this, or is it that? That will be very, very complicated. But I think what you said is absolutely right. Like, it's just going and meeting with a psychotherapist or the coach or the counselor and see how you feel. Because with psychotherapists, all the psychotherapists, myself and all my colleagues, you have a first consultation that is free of charge. That's about generally like 30 minutes, sometimes more. And in that conversation, you can get a sense of how the psychotherapist works. And you should ask questions. One is, what is your accreditation? How do you work? How do you think that you will work with me? And then get a sense of, does this work for me or not? And I would think, go out and have those conversations with a few. I don't think that you should just have it with one. I mean, it's free of charge, so you can just,
so
try 10.
Literally a bit of a try before you buy, but get comfortable with what advice that you're looking for.
The chemistry, this is what I was saying before, that the research shows is the relational aspect between the client and the psychotherapist is absolutely critical.
And I think that important bit is try. If you feel as though you think that you need some support, go and find a little bit of support that might lead you onto the right path to deal with emotions or whatever your journey entails. So
And I think further advice that I will give on this is, give a try, and different people ask those questions about accreditation and but also once you start in the sessions, I think what it is important is to be really honest, and that might be very difficult, but it's you get what you put in. If you go to therapy and you give answers yes, no, a little bit sad, it's just going to be very difficult to work through that. And your psychotherapist will help for sure. If you feel like really defended and worried, your psychotherapist will help. But you also help if you try to open up and talk about how you feel, again with the reassurance that the conversations will be confidential, except in specific situations. I can tell you when. So conversations with psychotherapists are not confidential if they are required by a court of law, which is very rare, but I was mentioned to my clients. If the client requires a letter from the psychotherapist for the GP or for somebody else, or if we see that the client is at risk or somebody around them is at risk.
Yeah. And kind of, how do you find, like, it must be really rewarding for you, kind of, like, so it can be a long period of time that you're working with somebody, maybe it's more months and years perhaps.
Yes, I always say in psychotherapy we don't count in weeks, we count at least in months, often in years.
But it must be really rewarding when you've supported somebody through that journey. Kind of, what does it look like when you've finished with somebody and you know that they're in a good place? What's the kind of signs that you get from them that actually I think we're doing well here?
Yeah, it's well, they start talking about it, about how they feel and how they have changed and how different they are relating to others, to themselves. So it becomes very evident, and sometimes it is actually physical. You actually notice. I mean, I've noticed, some clients dealing with very specific issues that they come to the sessions, and at the beginning, remember this person that, obviously not going to disclose anything, but in the last session, she came with a bright red coat. And that was, to me, that was like such a sign of where she was compared to where she was at the beginning. So sometimes to see that is I mean, it's so rewarding and sometimes emotional. I mean, I do feel emotional when you have seen someone going through the journey and at the end they are, just happy with a bright red coat.
Oh, it must be amazing.
You can see the elation in your face as you said that. You just lit up there, because it must be quite. I know we're running out of time, but it must be quite. It must be hard for you guys to do what you do, because you're carrying quite a lot of weight from hearing someone else's emotions. So, do you support one another within your community? Is it quite important for you also to have therapy yourselves because of the what you do?
So all of the psychotherapies that are registered with the bodies that I have mentioned, BACP, UKCP, we are required to have our own supervision. So I have a supervisor who has a supervisor who has a supervisor, and so on.
Excellent.
And so that we meet with the supervisor, depends, sometimes twice a month, sometimes once a month, and it's a check. That am I thinking about this? How am I? I'm thinking about this client this way. What do you think? Because it is important, and it again is within the confidentiality. So that is important, and all psychotherapists have that, and also often we also have what we call peer supervision, which I have had for some time, and it's basically a group of psychotherapists that also meet regularly to talk about what they are seeing. I'm seeing more of this, I'm seeing this client, and I'm really struggling. I'm not really sure whether we feel a little bit stuck. So how any thoughts?
So you're troubleshooting between yourselves, really, about how to manage patients.
I mean, it is very important, because otherwise it becomes a very isolating job that, you're just there with your clients, but you do need to check with someone else. How am I thinking about this? Am I missing something? Because when you talk it to your supervisor might say, "Oh, you might be missing this." So it is very helpful. But it is, what you say about whether it feels like a weight. Well, it is very. It can feel a little bit difficult, but I think the feeling of purpose, of feeling of what I'm doing is meaningful. It really more than compensates for any difficulty. So on a day-to-day, it doesn't feel like, oh, this is this heaviness, because, or I personally finish my sessions feeling like, more often than not, hopefully, feeling that, this has been good. We have done something, we have progressed. It just feels like, sometimes it is very difficult, but even when it is difficult, it feels like we have cracked something, we have opened something, we have allowed for something to come.
Move people on.
I think what you do is amazing. I really do.
It is amazing.
It is amazing. Knowing what it feels like to be a person on the other side of it and how it benefited me. People like you are incredible, and I'm grateful that you guys.
I think it's such a privilege, to actually. This is what I was telling you before. Is you learn to see humanity in a very, very different way, because if we navigate life, people are have walls or have facades that they show it. As I was telling you, it is important to have those, because without us holding our emotions, society will will crack. We all have to hold something. We cannot be raw there in the world, in our work, showing everything. But I have the privilege of seeing people in, the rawest and the most, the deepest, the scariest fantasies, the more, the strongest fears, and to see that it's seeing humanity in a very, very different way. And what I always say, the thing that I see the most is it's actually not the difficulties. What I see is the bravery, because it takes such strength to come every week to psychotherapy and talk about this. So ultimately, what I'm what I'm seeing every day in and day out, is that strength, that bravery that people have to actually face their issues.
So do you think that's what men need? A little bit more bravery?
Maybe.
And go and
bit more bravery, bit more therapy, bit more talk.
Sort of thoughts? I think they do.
Yeah, I think this has been brilliant. It's been our own therapy, I think.
I think it has.
Yeah,
It's certainly opened my eyes.
Really good.
It's really, really positive.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day,
It's
Alejandra.
been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, how do people find you? We'll put a whole load of links in the show notes to these professional bodies, but how do they find you?
So the organization is called Fertility Support, but the website is fertilitysupportlondon.com. So they can just go there and they will see. I have to update it so that we actually have more therapists that are listed on the website.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again so much. We hope this has opened some people's minds to psychotherapy or any kind of talking therapy and support for men. And wish you all the best.
Or at least to open up to talk about their emotions with their friends, even if they are not going to psychotherapy. At least find someone, a friend, someone that you can actually talk with.
Yeah, step in the right direction, isn't it?
It's good to talk.
It is good to talk.
Well, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.